Hello, everybody. Randy Patterson here again with Boomerosity. The guy I'm about to share my interview with you, I realized is from a band that came a little after what normal baby boomers would say is part of our wheelhouse of listening. But I know you've heard of them. I know we're not locked into the genre of 50s, 60s, 70s, and very early 80s. In fact, you guys, many of you are much more progressive in your listening habits than I am, and listening to new bands and up and comers and whoever the latest are. And a lot of you are even into hip hop. I'm not one of those kind of guys, but hey, I love the diversity our demographic represents there. And so if you remember in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a band called Bare Naked Ladies, or as they say here in Tennessee where I live, Bare Naked Ladies. They had great songs like If I Had $1 Million, Brian Wilson, 1 Week, It's All Been Done, and even the theme song from the Big Bang Theory. And these guys are great. And the songwriter for them was Stephen Page. And he writes very intricate, very detailed, very thought-provoking, and even quirky type of lyrics. And that's what intrigued me by him, because let's face it, rock and roll lyrics are basically pretty simple. But you can't say that about Bare Naked Lady songs or Stephen Page songs, which are one and the same, but he has come out with several solo records. And the new one that you see behind me, Excelsior, is his latest one. So I talked to him just before he was going on stage, before the last night of his tour with, get this, The Who. And we talked for quite a bit, and he shared a lot of insight into this new album, what he did during the pandemic, and so on and so forth. So it was a fun talk. I think you guys are really going to like it, and I really think you'll want to share it with your friends, especially any of your friends who are fans of Bare Naked Ladies. So without any further ado, here is my first of what I hope are many more interviews with the great Stephen Page. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerosity. Take care. Hello, Stephen.
How are you?
I am doing great. I'm catching you on the road, aren't I?
I am backstage at the United Center in Chicago right now.
Wow. So I want to talk to you about that in just a moment, but I want to thank you first for joining me, and I'll stick to the talking points, but I got to tell you a funny story very quickly.
Yeah.
I kind of was drug kicking and screaming into Zoom calls, and lately it seems like the last few I've done, there's been some latency and some jitter, and on the other end, and people talking. And it looks like a bad Japanese movie, and and so I started telling the publicist. I said, "Hey, might have the people reboot their device before they click in, so they could clear out the cache and all that."
Yep.
And so I said that to Bob last night, and he writes back, and you'll appreciate this because of just how dry he can be. But I'll read it verbatim. He says, "Cannot think of anybody more Zoom savvy than Stephen. He's done 92 live from home shows via Zoom. Next one is 1029. And his Zoom song that is part of Excelsior gives no small indication that he always strives for technical excellence." So I thought that was
God love you, Bob.
So I loved it. So you embrace technology pretty heartedly, don't you?
It's not exactly what I had in mind when all this stuff happened. And when the pandemic started and people were like doing Instagram lives and Facebook lives and all that kind of stuff. So the last thing I wanted to do was jump on and do live concerts. But then as this thing started to drag on, I was like, well, let's see. I watched a friend of mine, Dan Mangan, who's a singer-songwriter from Vancouver. I watched him do a Zoom concert, and it was amazing. It was like the great thing about it compared to the other tech out there is you can see the other people. And, the first one I did, there were like 1,000 people. They're not 1,000 people every time I do them now, but a few hundred people every time. And they get to know each other. They watch each other in their cars and their backyards and their kitchens and taking their kids to soccer practice or whatever they're doing. And there's the chat function. So they end up kind of like creating this sense of community inside this thing. And it was like, usually, especially when it's like major corporations, tech kind of whatever, I'm yes, totally kicking and screaming into it. But this is one, as I say in the song, I concede this one to the 1%.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. There you go. I know during the pandemic, I watched a couple of one of those pay-per-views, as I paid the extra few bucks to be on the VIP part of Joe Bonamassa's show that he did at the Ryman. And you were just in Nashville, and I hate that I had to miss it, man. I wanted to catch you there at the City Winery, but anyway, it was kind of, I mean, I love Bonamassa, but man, when he was playing, he does one of those big crashing endings, and then it's crickets, you know.
Oh, right, because there's nobody in the audience,
right,
for sure.
because there was cutouts, you know, and if you paid the extra bucks like I did, there was a cutout of me there and
that's cool. 2,000
others, but no applause. And I thought for an artist that has to be tough. And then also, you know, I'm in pretty good with the guys in Toto, and they did a pay-per-view, and and there were just, you know, you hear like 4 people clapping, and I thought, man, I wish there was a way we could pipe that in, so just to give that feedback to the artist. So, but what is the pros and cons that you're seeing though, as you've done this over the last couple of years? What's especially with your live show? I mean, I know for me, I'm a pike compared to you on this, but I've grown to love it because I can be a little more prolific in my output on things. But how about for you?
Well, one of the things for me, by doing weekly shows, weekly live streams, which was, I didn't expect it was going to go to 92, 93 episodes of this thing. But, when you're on the road and you're going night to night in different towns, every town you can kind of play the same skeleton of the same set list, at least. And then you swap out song here and there. But in general, the shape of the set list is the same. But when you have, I was starting to think of it this way. Imagine I was doing a weekly show like John Oliver does, where you have the same audience comes back every week to see what you're up to, like a TV show does, a weekly TV show, or a Saturday Night Live or that kind of thing. So every show I would develop a different theme, whether it was I played every album over the course of a series of shows, from the very first Bare Naked Ladies album all the way to my most recent one. I've done alphabetical shows like A to Z. I've done shows based on mood. I've done all covers, all those kinds of things. And that really pushed me creatively in a great way. Because I'm not like a covers guy. I didn't grow up in a covers band or anything else. I learned to play guitar solely so I could accompany my songs I was writing, so I could accompany myself. So here I am doing like shows of all covers, or learning all these old Bare Naked Ladies songs that I never really played except for the day I wrote them. And then the other guys would play the songs live and I would sing them. So all that kind of stuff really pushed me in a great way. And I think it's just made me a better musician.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, man, I got to say about your songwriting, one thing I love about it, I love rock and roll, but rock and roll can be a little lazy on the lyric side.
Sure.
And as compared to, say, country music, but your stuff is deep, it's intricate, it has some great plays on words, quirky, all that, all the stuff I love. If I was going to be a songwriter, it'd probably be more like you than anybody else I know, because I love all of that about your music. So to be able to talk to you is just a big honor. But speaking of, let's talk about this new album that here behind me, man. What's the story behind it? How did you put it all together and that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I when the pandemic started, I had a big chunk of these songs on the go, and I thought right away, I think as lots of people thought, I'm going to write the great American novel, or I'm going to write a screenplay, or learn to bake bread, all those things that we said we were going to do. I said, I'm going to finish this album right away. Now we've got this time. And I felt like time did this weird thing where every day felt like it was in slow motion, just like 1.5 or 75% motion. It was like just slightly slower. But then at the end of the day, you think, what did I do? Nothing. I don't have anything done. Doing these live from home shows gave me a thing every week to work towards, learning material or writing a new song for it or whatever else. But the album kind of sat there for a while. And then I started gathering new material through the pandemic. And, I have a studio up in Canada. I live in upstate New York, but I have a studio up in Canada, and I was planning on going up there. The borders were closed for over a year. So I couldn't go up there and record. I couldn't go up there and see my kids. I couldn't get up there and see my parents. Luckily, my wife and I have a good situation in upstate New York, and I was able to keep making music. But yeah, it was eventually around last Christmas where I was like, okay, time to crack the whip. If I just keep tinkering with this stuff, it's never going to come out. It's time to decide what this record is. And what I had imagined as being a record with maybe even with full orchestra on some stuff and a full band behind me became something that I largely did myself. My friend Kevin Fox, who plays with me live, played a lot of cello on it, and I had a few other players, but who would, now with the magic of modern technology, you're able to send somebody your tracks, record them at home. But for the most part, it's pretty well me. It maybe in this, I think about records that I love that people like Paul McCartney would do, where he's plugging into the tape machine. This record is a lot less basic than that. Like those records are almost kind of like sketchbooks. This I tried to make more like a finished oil painting, which made it take me some time. But in the end, it became kind of this fairly large sounding record, which you can now do it when you're making records at home.
Yeah. Well, I know aside from the pandemic caused differences, how else was this album different for you to put together compared to your other solo albums and the BNL records as well?
Sure. I think, the themes of the record are in some ways more serious. I mean, there's still kind of, like you said, there's wordplay and there's quirkiness and in language choices and metaphors and so on. But musically, I was trying to do something that was, I'm in my 50s now. You start thinking about the things that are bigger than you in a different way. My appreciation for, it sounds simple, but the beauty of nature, my sense of like where I used to write songs that were very self-deprecating, the sense that somehow I know there's something wrong with me. And, I've done some work. I like myself a little better than I used to, but there's that sense of like, well, the connection that we're missing, that we're using, with using technology to kind of bridge those gaps. Is that enough? Do we need each other really? And yeah, of course the answer is yes, but it's worth exploring those questions. And then those questions about what's bigger than us, whether it's a spiritual question or an astronomical question, they're all, I enjoyed being able to kind of tackle all those questions in a way that feels not pedantic, it feels personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel vulnerable doing that?
Totally. And putting any record out is like the release of a record, or when you've mastered it and you can't go back and fix anything. For me, it's like there's nothing more stressful because I am at my most vulnerable. I kind of in my mind start thinking of all the criticisms people might heap on it, or the fact that people might ignore it is the other fear you have. You worked so hard, you've laid yourself bare over this thing, and then nobody's really paying attention. All that stuff is kind of like ticking through my head. And the best remedy for that is for me to just, as I say, keep going. Just keep writing new stuff, keep playing live shows, just keep moving forward.
Just keep leaning into it. Again, you and I are very similar in another way. We both have self-deprecating humor. I always trip them to say self-defecating, but same thing, right? So, but and some people, they don't like that. But I think if you can't make fun of yourself, then you're going to have a hard time getting through life. But
That's right. I always say take what you do seriously, but you don't have to take yourself seriously.
good point. I like that. I may quote you on that in the future a lot. So, what's feedback been? It's been out for a couple weeks now. What are you hearing from people?
Well, the nicest thing is that fans with whom I've developed a long relationship with some of these fans, for 30 odd years. And over the course of the last couple of years, for many of them, I think they felt an even deeper connection because of the live streaming, and they've been kind of everything from whether they're following me on Patreon or on social media or these live stream shows, they feel some connection to me and my process. So I think people were kind of rooting for me, but I think there was a really nice sense of surprise from people. Like they may have had an idea about the shape of the songs, but not how they were arranged and how they sounded. And they were like, oh, this, like, I think it's transporting people. And I'm seeing people's responses on social media. Like, I was saying when the record first came out, it's kind of like, it's a grower, not a shower. It's you need to listen to it a few times, I think. And that's a lot to ask of an audience to, ideally put headphones on, close your eyes, lie back and dig into it, which is not necessarily the way that you would normally listen to a Stephen Page record. But this was designed to be that. I think, it's not a Pink Floyd record, but I was certainly, aware of what it was like for me as an 11 or 12-year-old lying on my parents' living room floor with headphones on, listening to Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah.
And I'm certainly not that record, but that experience was certainly in my mind as I was making this.
Much more intimate. Yeah, it seems like. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I know better than to ask an artist what's their favorite song, because it's like choosing your favorite kid, and we're not really supposed to do that. But which song from this album would you point to as a calling card, saying, "Hey, if you like this, you're really going to like the rest of the record"?
Sure. Well, I think the first song, "Feel," is such a journey. It has 3 or 4 different kind of scenes inside a not very long song. I think it's about 4-minute song, and it starts with a church choir and an organ at the beginning of a funeral, and then it's kind of this interior monologue that then kind of breaks out and goes external and becomes up tempo, and there's a lot of different styles and sounds and stuff in there. And I think if you listen to that and it appeals to you, then you may want to continue on the journey through the record.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice too. That's I know it hooks you, and it doesn't drag you along. You willfully put the leash on and walk along. Right. So you're wrapping up this tour. If I read the itinerary correctly, tonight's your last night opening for The Who. Is that correct?
Yes. So we've done 5 shows opening for The Who, which has just been, it's a dream come true. They're,
I bet,
probably the first band that weren't the Beatles that I was in love with. As a kid, I was obsessed with the Beatles. And then I had a babysitter bring over a copy of Meaty Beaty Big and Bouncy when I was about 8 years old. And I just fell in love with it. And Who's Next after that. And then, went through the whole catalog and have had many periods of obsession with the Who's catalog and different parts of it. And then when they asked us to come and do these shows with them, obviously honor of a lifetime, but just to be able to be out in the audience and watch 5 concerts by the Who is just like, what a privilege.
Yeah. I've only seen them once. I saw them in about 15 years ago in Little Rock, as Pete says. And it was right after Roger got out of the hospital for something with his voice. But man, what a great show. And you and Pete are very similar in that you adapt to technology and you leverage it in ways that people may not necessarily think of. And what I liked about him is he kind of turned it around on what he kind of did a reverse Grateful Dead and was selling his own bootlegs after the show, And so a couple weeks later, I got that concert, which I just think is amazing. But
that's what we used to do. We used to do that with Bare Naked Ladies, where we actually had the guy who was out as our tour manager and front of house sound mixer, Paul Forks. We used to have him backstage recording the Bare Naked Ladies shows, and they would be available on a USB thumb drive as soon as we walked out of the show.
Very cool. I had to wait a couple weeks for my CD from The Who. But What did you know the guys before this, before you were asked?
Not at all. No, I think it was one of those things where my manager and Live Nation, who were the promoters, I think they had to submit this to the Who for their approval, so it had to go through their management, and then Roger and Pete both had to okay it, which is like, Roger and Pete okayed this. It's pretty awesome, and that was it. I had no connection with them at all before, apart from just being a fan.
Right, right. Well, do you get to
Luckily, the
hang with?
shows have gone great, so maybe they'll ask us back sometime.
Well, that would be, that is my next question. Is there's any plans to tour with them anymore? And do you get to hang with them much, or is it one of those things where you're off and then you go on to the hotel and, oh, you said you sit out in the audience, but do you get to hang with Pete and Roger at all?
Not really. Pete has come by and said hello a few times, like chatted in the dressing room, which is awesome. Roger, you kind of get the nod in the hallway. That's kind of it. And then they're in and out. I think they fly from gig to gig, whatever. But just the fact that I've had any contact with them at all, because I didn't, you never know going into this situation whether you're even going to see those people beyond stage. But they seem, the best thing about it is they seem really invested in making sure the audience gets a great show. And I think it would be so easy for them to phone it in and cash their check and go home. But like when something goes wrong technically, you can see they're mad. And which, first of all, you want to see the Who mad. That's that's what we're paying for.
The
But second
rebellion.
of all, it just, for me, is like, it's inspiring to see people who are still so invested in making sure the audience gets a great show and that they care.
Yep. What's been the response from the crowds opening for him? Because I mean, it's a little bit different, sound there. I wouldn't
Exactly.
necessarily say genre because the spirit's kind of the same. That whole uniqueness of it all. But what's been the response from the crowd?
Amazingly good. I mean, we started in Toronto, which is my hometown, so it's a mixed bag. I knew that they would know the songs. That was that level of familiarity, which is great. But they could also, I mean, as Canadians, we tend to be hard on our own hometown folks. So you kind of know you have to earn it. So we just go there and we work our asses off for 40 minutes every night and do these shows. And the greatest thing is feeling the audience come around. I remember when I was a kid, in 1982, the Who came to Exhibition Stadium in Toronto, and they had Joe Jackson as their opening act, who's one of my favorites. And the audience booed them, and eventually he got hit by a hot dog that someone threw, and they left the stage. This is the mythology of the Who in Toronto. And so I said to the audience in Toronto, first of all, I remember this, and I was worried, you guys are rough. But second of all, I remembered that I love hot dogs. So it doesn't sound so bad. And second of all, whoever threw that hot dog in 1982 is probably 70 now.
That's right.
It probably doesn't have nearly as good an arm.
You just watch it just lob right in front of you.
Yeah.
That's too funny. So like I said earlier, I missed your show in Nashville. How did you like playing the City Winery? That's a very nice, intimate. I mean, I've been there before and seen a gig or two, but how'd you like playing there?
It's a really lovely place. We've played. They're all over the country. There's one in New York and Philly and Boston and DC and stuff, and they're all really nice clubs. And I like them because, I mean, sometimes people come and they go, well, people are eating while you're playing. Because it's kind of like a supper club. And I think it's great because if you're going to go into town to watch a show, you don't have to make a reservation somewhere else. You can just sit down there.
That's right.
Eat, watch a great show with great sound. It's relatively intimate. And then you're home by 11 o'clock. Perfect. I can't complain.
And they can't throw hot dogs there, but
they can't throw hot dogs. And it's not and that size of a venue is a weird size. Like it could be, either it'd be like a little community theater would fit that many people, or it would be like a standing room rock and roll club. And, at our age, we may not want to stand all night.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Me more than you, my friend. I'm a little bit older than you. So, who else would you like to tour with now that you've opened for the Who? Who else would you like to go on the road with?
I was thinking about it the other day because you think about like the artists of that generation who are kind of the most influential and important. There aren't that many left. Like it's the Stones, McCartney. Of course, I'd love to share a stage with either of them, but there's Rod Stewart, I guess. Like who I think is of that um, level, and it's they're all artists that I would go to see. So I'd love to be able to share a stage with. The other thing about our setup is it's just a trio. It's just me on acoustic guitar, Craig Northey on electric guitar, and Kevin Fox on cello, which is like when you see that in a big arena, especially before a big rock band like The Who, um, I think people think, how's this going to work? Well, one thing is, without bass and drums and big guitar amps and stuff, you have a lot more headroom to just turn everything up. So the sound of the trio really fills the venue. You have to be able to perform on that kind of scale, but the fact that it's not a big rock band actually I think has helped us a lot. So we could. What about Robert Plant and Alison Krauss? That'd be a good combo, I think.
There you go. Yeah, nice, dovetails nicely together. Talking about differences, same venue as I saw the Who, the Stones. I saw them before, and what was ironic is who opened for the Stones on that show was Merle Haggard.
Awesome.
I would have never put that together, but
Yeah, that's great.
Merle was a little ill, but he was still performing. They walked him out to the microphone, walked him back when he was done.
Beautiful.
But nice mix there. So, what? A couple more questions, very quickly.
Yeah.
What do you want to do that you haven't done yet musically?
Well, I mean, I got the great opportunity to write a musical. I'm a big fan of musical theater when it's good. I just like anything. People sometimes go, "Ooh, musical theater." Well, it's just like rock music. There's some terrible rock music out there, and there's some great rock music. There's some terrible cheesy musical theater, and there's some really great, moving, challenging, smart musical theater as well. So I tried to write that type with a Canadian playwright named Daniel McIver, and it was commissioned by the Stratford Festival in Canada, which is the biggest theater festival up there. And it was about to be on stage, and then the pandemic hit. We were in the middle of rehearsals when we had to shut down 6 weeks before the show was supposed to open. So I would love to have another chance to either have that show get up on its feet or write another show. That would be a really exciting challenge to be able to jump into again.
Cool. And this last question is not meant to be macabre in any way, shape, or form. And I hope I get to interview you a lot more in the future now that we've finally met. But how, once you step off the great tour bus in the sky, or the great tour bus of life, up at the great gig in the sky, to borrow from Pink Floyd that you mentioned earlier, how do you want to be remembered, and what do you hope your legacy is?
I think as I get older, I care less about legacy. I mean, I would love it if people now were able to enjoy the stuff I do. And I do love it when people are like, tell me stories about, my parents or my grandparents or my, played your stuff. Like now we're at grandparents' age.
Yeah.
Or it's just like, that was my first year in college was this song, or this thing reminds me of my first girlfriend, whatever that is. Like, I love that stuff. And that means a lot to me. When I'm not here, I kind of don't care as much. But the greatest thing is, like, I want people who worked with me, people who live with me, my family, my kids, to have good memories of the experiences I was able to share with them. Like I'm traveling around now with two of my favorite people in the world in this trio, and just the fact that it is every day has challenges and joy, and our eyes are open. To me, it's a kid and ask for better.
Well, Stephen, like I said, I first of all, thank you for all the years of great music, and that makes it part of the soundtrack of our lives, and that's no small thing, my friend. And I'm glad we finally got to talk, and let's pick up again down the road and put one of these together whenever you have something new coming out that you want the word to get out on. I'll do my part to help make that happen.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I look forward to next time.
All right, well, knock him dead tonight, and stay clear of Pete's flying guitars if he's doing that this time around. All right.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Take
Randy.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.